again, we're here tonight with Captain Joyce Riley with the American Gulf War Veterans Association, and she's speaking about the chemical, biological, and genetic engineering causes behind the Gulf War syndrome, and how these things, by being covered up and suppressed at this crucial moment, is going to bring certain individuals that have been infected by this beyond the halfway mark. Yet there are certain treatments, such as the Nicholsons and other ones, who have dioxycycline and other things. And we have a number that I'd like to put up on the screen also again, the contact number for the American Gulf War Veterans Association, where veterans can get this information and get these treatments. And this is out of Texas, 713-587-5437. And that's the number veterans should call. The 1-800 number is for the public if they want more information. But, pardon me?
The websites?
And, well, those aren't up on there. I can't say squiggly thing. Now, there are websites and other things that are available on the internet. And when you call those numbers, they'll give you that information. And that information is also available here locally at the Bahai Center, located at 1830 South Avenue, across from the Southgate Mall. We have you back here, Joyce?
You betcha.
Okay, let's take our first call. Line 2, right? Yeah, okay. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, Captain Riley?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you a question. Is it possible? I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia 2 years ago this month, and I was wondering if I could have contracted this through the movement of the DOD vehicles. I work for a railroad, and we were exposed to these vehicles returning from the Gulf War. Any answers to that?
Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but absolutely. I've had a number of letters from individuals that work for the railroads, as well as those that worked on ships that were bringing vehicles back. The problem with this equipment is that it was not decontaminated. Now, here again, understand the Pentagon and the U.S. government is telling you there's no illness in the first place. Biologicals and chemicals were not being used. And just like Michelle said with 1984, they're telling you lie after lie after lie. And a lie told enough times becomes the truth. But it is not. And you see, the vehicles coming back had biological and chemical contaminants on it. The biologicals are the ones that give you the communicable disease, like we've discussed. And fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, there has been an epidemic of that since 1991. Ask yourself why. Nobody seems to be asking this. They're just handing out all these diagnoses. But yes, I believe there's a definite correlation between people that worked in the railway, people that worked in shipping, people that were involved with the items that were brought back, either surplus items or the vehicles.
Thank you, Captain Riley.
Thank you. By the way, I am not a active duty captain right now. I am a reserve, inactive reserve captain, so please just call me Joyce.
Okay, thanks, Joyce.
Do you have any more questions or comments?
No, I sure don't. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for calling in. Okay.
Could I say one thing first?
Sure.
I would sure like for him to write me a letter, and I will send him the information free of charge. Just remind me that I talked to you on the program, and tell me about your problem relating to this, because I need that kind of information. That's how we're going to go, and we're going to put it in front of the Pentagon and the CIA and say, here's what you've done to the American people.
Hello, you're on the air.
Good evening, Neil. How are you? I'd like to ask Joyce a question, and then sort of a general question. First of all, I'd like to know. She was talking about supplies and such, surplus supplies, machinery and so forth, and tanks and trucks and all that stuff coming back to the States from the Gulf. Could any of these chemicals appear in surplus clothing?
Yes. In fact, I've gotten several reports from those that have purchased it from either flea markets or from surplus areas, in which, for instance, I'll give you an example. There was a gentleman who bought a hat, the camouflage caps.
Right.
He got a rash, first of all, at the brim of the cap, and then, or at his forehead, and then later got a tumor there that was removed. Then he had another tumor that appeared after that one was removed. And another individual who reports, and I'm just talking about anecdotal stories here, obviously we're not talking about anything confirmed by science, but Another individual who wore the combat boots got a rash over the bridge of his foot, which is usually what happens first, and then he developed a tumor at the bridge of his foot, which is a very unusual place for a tumor, especially in a young man. So, yes, I am concerned about the equipment. Now, I don't know if it's been washed, if that affects it. I don't know if it's been bleached, if that affects it. I don't know. I don't have any answers because there hasn't been any research done because, as you understand, there is no Gulf War illness and no biologicals or chemicals were used, according to the Pentagon.
Right.
It is now placing our troops and our American population at risk.
There was one other thing I wanted to ask in general, and if Joyce wishes to comment on this, I'd be more than happy to listen to her comments. I'd like to know how, if during the Vietnam War, for instance, the head of the defoliation program, the Agent Orange program, Oral Zumwalt, his own son died from being exposed to Agent Orange, and no one knew this. I mean, they obviously knew it in his family and so forth, and maybe a small clique of officers or military folk. But if this was not made public knowledge, general knowledge until I'm guessing 10 years ago, 5 or 10 years ago, how can we expect the United States government to fess up, to come clean, and really let us know what's going on? It can't be done. It's due to past performance.
If I believed that, I would have given up 2 years ago. I don't believe that it cannot be done. I have put my life on the line. I am literally a marked target now because of what I have said and what I have done. I will not stop getting this information out. Both my husband and I are committed to this issue so strongly that we will tell the American people. And because there are people like Michelle and like Dave, and I'm sorry, I forgot the other person's name. I'm sorry. Neil, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Because there are people like you who are willing to put this on the air, America is going to know the truth. Now, I will admit that I was like the rest of the individuals. When Agent Orange came along, I thought these guys just wanted a handout. So they got a rash. Big deal. Come on, guys, buck up. You went to war, okay? Now I understand what really went on. I've seen the deformities from Agent Orange. I've seen the deaths from Agent Orange. And they're going on right now as we speak. There are dyslexic children now as a result of Agent Orange. There are deformed children because of Agent Orange. And it's time that we relook at all of these issues. Just because it's always happened that way, atomic veterans, Dugway Proving Grounds, et cetera, doesn't mean it's going to go on any longer. America, they have crossed the line in the sand. They have hurt our military. They have killed our military. They are going to stop. And with my last breath, I will make sure they do this.
I wasn't, Joyce, please don't misunderstand me. I was not impugning your loyalty nor your commitment to this issue. From what I've heard this evening, I believe that you are committed to this issue, and you are extremely loyal. You're a loyal reserve captain. You're a loyal American, and I applaud you for putting your life on the line to get this information out. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. And one of the things I want to say is, just like this gentleman that called, he cares, and you can tell he cares, and he wants to do the right thing. He wants America to know the truth, just like we do. But it's going to take the action of individuals other than just myself. My husband and I cannot do it alone. And we do not want to run the risk of being silenced, that if we stop, nobody else would be doing it. So I think before we end the program, we need to talk about what individuals can do to help us. And I'm not talking about giving money or coming to Houston. I'm talking about what you can do in your own area to help out with the Gulf War veterans and this disease that is prevalent in America today.
Very good. Now I wanted to say another comment, since the issue of loyalty to the country was brought up, that a lot of people used to say, America, love it or leave it. Well, this is America, love it and change it. That we have a chance to change this, and even if some of the people that are infected pass a halfway point, what about the children and the next generation? That we have to be able to stop these type of things not only from reoccurring in the future, but at least arrest the situation where they are. They thought AIDS had no cure, and they couldn't do anything for HIV, and then they found the AIDS gene. They found out if you had 2 of these, you couldn't even get AIDS. And if you had 1 of them, you would get HIV, but you wouldn't get any of the symptoms. So there are also alternative ways to even counteract these devious genetic experiments done in these chem labs and bio labs for war that can even reverse some of these things. Now, some people will be affected permanently, but other people can be remedied by this. And that we don't take a dark outlook on it. But to suggest that people are un-American about this is completely wrong. What was un-American was that when the Gulf War vets went over there, they were not told that America gave these chemical agents to Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi government, because that is considered to be treason of aiding and abetting the enemy by arming the enemy. If America is at war with another country and some group or individuals helps or had helped to arm these people and continued to do it, this is aiding and abetting. And there's a big international mess created by this, of which the culpability of the American government and top officials and cronies of Bush have already been found guilty on 19 war crimes against humanity. Tonight we're focusing on war crime number 7, and we're doing it from the standpoint of solutions. We have Joyce Riley on our phone lines, and we're taking more calls right now. And she is down in the Texas area with the American Gulf War Veterans Association. And she will be presenting treatments and solutions and what people can do active here in the local Missoula community to help get this message out. And we stand behind this 100%. Why? Well, Moses brought the law, and Jesus brought love, and Baha'u'llah, being a descendant of King David, seated on David's throne, brings justice. And we are pro-justice, especially for our own American men and women that swore to uphold this great Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And so we stand behind the Gulf War veterans and Joyce Riley and the American Gulf War Veterans Association. And we will be replaying tonight's program Monday at 11 a.m. and part 2 Tuesday at 11 a.m. And we might have further encore presentations of that. Meanwhile, our phone lines are open. If you're listening tonight on the internet, our number is 406-542-MCAT, and you're welcome to call in there. Okay, Joyce, we've got some more calls. Do you have any comments before we take those calls?
I like what you said very, very much, and I don't think your caller was at all talking about us being un-American and what we're saying, but I want to repeat and say that, yes, I took that oath to protect this country from enemies, foreign and domestic, and America, Missoula, you need to understand there are some domestic enemies in this country, and we do need to identify them and to remove them, because what we're talking about tonight is some of the most serious conversation that is going on in America today, because the accusations that I am making are almost unprecedented.
Okay, let's take some calls. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello. Joyce, this is an extremely important program, and I commend you for a job well done. I work with chemically injured civilians, and I made a little list of questions here, and I'd like to run through this very quickly with you if I can. First of all, regarding Michael F. Johnson, who found the chemical agents, I saw a program a while back involving a black CBR detection vehicle operator who actually testified on TV that he had found agents. Is this Mr. Johnson?
I don't know if that's him specifically. I know he was the one that found one of the particular agents in one of the particular sites that's listed in the Regal report.
Was it chemical or biological or both?
It was chemical.
Okay. And can you tell me who supplied the C&B agents to Iraq and Iran? In other words, what agency of the federal government?
It was not done by the agency of the federal government because, as of 1972, of course, it became illegal to do that, so they utilized black CIA projects and off-government budget areas to do this. They utilized primarily medical schools, research areas outside of the government, and then gave them the off-budget money to do it with. We do know that ATCC Corporation at Rockville, Maryland, was one of the major providers. Now, they're a nonprofit organization closely linked with Dr. Joshua Letterberg, who provided biologicals to Saddam Hussein.
Okay, and when was this done? What's the time frame?
83 to 89. There is some evidence that shows it was up to May of 1990.
Okay.
That is a biological agent. Now, we also know, and the reason I'm saying this is allegedly because there are 83 corporations that have been filed, a lawsuit has been filed against for making the biological agents. This lawsuit was filed, the plaintiffs were the Gulf War veterans, and it was filed by the Gulf War veterans against these chemical agents. The corporations we're talking about are ATCC Corporation, the PIT Corporation, it goes into Dresser Industries, M.W. Kellogg, a lot of other organizations. But I will tell you this, that before we finish, we need to get into the chemical components of this, which was PIT Corporation in Boca Raton, Florida. So to answer your question, Sigma Aldrich of St. Louis was one of them. Alcalac of Georgia. There's a number of those. And the documentation package that I provide has that information in it. American Gulf War Veterans Association provides this information so everybody can see that the statements that I am making are backed up by documentation. They're not just my opinion.
Okay, let's move off that one then, because I want to get through this. This is extremely important.
Well, I want
you described multiple illnesses.
As you go on, some of the stuff we just showed on the screen while you're talking is a list of the batch numbers of chemicals that have been shipped from here over to Iraq.
Okay.
But go on with your questions.
You also referred to multiple illnesses, which of course would probably mean multiple agents. And you said you would like to talk about the agents. Can you quickly list what you know in terms of chemical and biological agents?
Are you talking about the composition of both together?
No, just singly. First chemicals and then the biologicals.
Okay, the chemical agents. First of all, there is some issue about the chemical agents, whether or not they were used and whether or not our troops had an immediate response to it. They did on the battlefield, if that's what you're referring to. They had an immediate respiratory problem, which the CIA is denying. They had rashes, their skin was burning. And we have one of the NBC logs, nuclear, biological, and chemical logs of Schwarzkopf. And by the way, this is part of our evidence that has been declassified, is that the Central Command logs of General Schwarzkopf, which are essentially the roadmap of the Gulf War with regard to chemical and biological agents, shows that there were mustard gas burns on some of the troops. Well, if there's mustard gas burns, then there has to have been mustard gas displayed, and there has to have been a chemical agent. So we do know there were chemical agents that were utilized. There were cases of bleeding, cases of esophageal edema due to chemical agents, on and on and on. These people were treated for these agents at that time, contrary to what the U.S. government is telling you right now. Now, on the battlefield with regard to biological agents, I can't tell you whether or not it was definitely biological versus chemical, but there were abdominal distress situations, very tragic situations. Again, we had bleeding. I can't tell you if it was chemical versus biological or not.
Do you know the names of some of the biologicals other than the Mycoplasma incognita?
Yes, I can. I can tell you some of those. And we include those in the list of documentation also. Now, these agents were shipped to the Iraqi Atomic Energy Commission, the Ministry of Higher Education. The list that I have shows the actual dates of transmission, along with the batch numbers, like Michelle was saying. They were Class 3 pathogens that were shipped to Saddam Hussein. Now, for instance, on February, are you a scientist or a medical person?
I have a library card.
Okay. On February 22nd, for instance, of 1985, the Ministry of Higher Education of Iraq was shipped Histoplasma capsulatum. Let's see, go down the list. On May 2nd of 1986, they were shipped Bacillus anthracis, or anthrax, Clostridium botulinum, Clostridium perfringens, gas gangrene, Bacillus subtilis, Clostridium tetanus. There's just
Okay. I get the picture.
But let me say, I want to talk about the encephalitis for a minute, because that's one of the big diagnoses of these Gulf War veterans, is we're finding, and they're calling it in the lay sect, they're calling it brain shrinking disease. Are you seeing any of the so-called brain shrinking phenomenon?
I'd like to describe it this way. We've probably all seen a spider that gets too close to the heat, and how it very suddenly gets small. They burn up and kind of crinkle up. Well, if you consider a brain cell, and bear in mind the picture of that spider, then these solvents are actually causing incineration of brain tissue. So the brain shrinkage I don't know if we're describing the same thing, but we're finding voids, lesions, tangling, and fibrils and organelles in the brain, and these are due to the hexacarbon exposures in many cases. So yes, that can definitely cause a loss of brain mass.
Well, that's really interesting because the autopsy reports, like for instance, I've got one on my desk right now that's from a 26-year-old paratrooper, and it shows that his disease is encephalopathy or encephalitis or a brain shrinking disease, they said, in which his brain was wasting away. Now, I've been told by a neurosurgeon that this closely relates to the spongiform encephalopathy or mad cow disease.
Sure.
Now, I can't, attest to that myself, but I will tell you that we're seeing huge numbers of this. Now, this ought to infuriate people to think that you're being told there is no problem. It's all in their quote-unquote head. Well, it is. Their brains are shrinking. Now, here's another problem we're seeing, and I'd be interested in your reflection on this.
Sure.
Is we're having tremendous numbers of these guys that are committing acts of violence that had no priors, that are doing bizarre kinds of violent activities that there is no reason for it. They are murdering people they don't even know. They are becoming very violent. One gentleman that I'm working with the public defender on right now, this guy was a commander of his unit. He comes back from the war. He is a most respectable person, never even so much as spit on the sidewalk, and he butchers his dog. Now, help me understand what's going on here. Of course, the government says these guys are just, bad people. Well, I don't believe so. I believe there has been, now, just like we're seeing, the arms and legs are jerking of these men and women.
Sure.
They're jerking. Their nerve endings, the myelin sheath is missing. Obviously, it's got to be doing the same thing for the brain.
I would get an article that's written by Dr. Anna Sepalainen out of Helsinki, Finland. It's called The Changing Picture of Solvent Toxicology. She refers to suicides and violent behavior in solvent workers, and yes, we are seeing this. I am told that by a man in Michigan who is documenting this, that in the pesticide applicators who work with many of these toxic compounds, there's a lot of violence in the home. And also, make note of this, when the GABA NMDA receptor mechanisms are unbalanced, which would be the respiratory mechanisms of the individual brain cells, and the brain cells flash and die, forming lesions, those areas interfere with the transmission of neuronal energy, and they can also produce their own aberrant signals in the brain. So you have people with little radio stations going off in their head all the time, and yes, it can cause very, very high degree of anxiety and violent behavior. The literature going back 50 years is clear on that. So this is something that we're seeing in the civilian population. I hear a lot about it from auto mechanics who just lose it on the job and start smashing things, and they get better when they get away from the chems.
I hope, and this is my goal, is to take not just what's happened with the Gulf War veterans, but take it into the general population and show that this has been going on, that there are industrial workers that are being exposed to the same kind of thing. And what I would ask of anyone out there is, if you have knowledge, just like yourself and what you're talking about, please let me know. We need expert witnesses who are willing to talk about this, because we have men all over this country who are either on death row or getting ready to be sentenced for crimes that they don't even remember. They don't know why it happened, and they need our help. And I am not one of those people, believe me, that wants to find a defense for every action. But this is abominable to think that they went to serve their country, they got sprayed with these biological agents or chemical agents or whatever, they come back here, they have violent outbursts, they place them on Prozac, Halcyon, Ativan, Zoloft, and Busbar, and then they do even worse things. So these men and women need our help, and this is a plea throughout this nation. And if you are interested, please send me the documents, the information on these subjects, and if anyone is interested in being expert witnesses, we need to know about you.
Joyce, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for calling. Okay, our line's open again. If you'd like to call in, again, Joyce Riley's here with us from the American Gulf War Veterans Association. We're talking about Gulf War syndrome, its treatment, its causes, its background, the cover-up, the lies, the denial. But tonight, our focus again is on the Gulf War syndrome, its causes, its treatments. We're here with an expert on this subject, Joyce Riley from the American Gulf War Veterans Association. Hello, you're on the air.
Good evening, Neil.
Good evening.
This whole topic is very alarming to me.
I just have a simple question. I was trying to, there's so much information going out that it's kind of hard to decipher all at once, but Joyce had mentioned that this is a communicable disease. How alarming should we be as the public for, like that one fellow that called in that worked for the railroad?
Well, it depends on what if you're talking about occupational exposure, if you're exposed to items that come back from the Persian Gulf area, I think you need to be concerned even now, because we have evidence to believe that the biological agents stay alive and bind to the silica in the sand over there for about 10 years, somewhere between 8 to 10 years. If it is in the dark, it can stay up to 40 years. Now, if we're talking about communicability from a Gulf War veteran to you, here I must make a plea. My goal is not to make lepers out of our military. They have suffered enough. They have been humiliated. They have been told they're nothing but a mental case when they are really sick, and it's got to stop. I do not want to further isolate them. I am a Gulf War veteran myself. I have had the disease, and I am concerned about that. But here is the mode of transmission of the disease. It is transferred by blood, by sex, and the worst way, I believe, is perspiration. Now, let me go through these just real quickly. The blood transfusion is an issue because we have pleaded with the American Association of Blood Banks, the American Red Cross, to stop taking Gulf War veterans' blood. We are now asking Gulf War veterans to voluntarily abstain from giving blood because the blood bank is continuing to take their blood. Now, remember Bob Dole, who was the Senate Majority Leader,
Right.
actually had a wife who worked and controls. Elizabeth Dole controls over 50% of the blood donations in this country. She controls all of the blood, it's my understanding, coming from military bases. Now, we have asked that they stop taking the blood. They're not doing it. So Gulf War veterans are lining up at every weekend UTA activity, unit training activity, and giving blood. The disease is going into the mainstream. Thus, more chronic fatigue, more fibromyalgia, more night sweats, more problems. So that's an issue. The sexual transmission, obviously. The spouses are getting it, no question. And we haven't even talked about what happens to the female spouses. But the females develop proliferative endometriosis. That means the uterine tissue comes outside of the uterus and grows. We believe to be a biological or viral response. They have the chronic fatigue, the rash, the joint pain, just like their husbands. The children get rashes, the children get fevers, the children get sore throats, and just basically failure to thrive. Now, the sexual transmission, obviously that's fairly plain. The other transmission, which is perspiration, is something fairly new. We do know that the vapor transfused or that goes through the skin can pass this disease. I have had reports from physicians who tell me their patient got the Gulf War illness from a tanning bed or from a workout area, from an aerobic exercise area. Am I trying to alarm people? No. Am I trying to tell you the truth? Yes. Because if it is, as we postulate and we believe and we know now is transferred through perspiration, then those people that are at workout gyms definitely need to make sure they put a towel down and they wipe up the perspiration. I have had very young men who have come down with a Gulf War illness, and the only thing they know is that they exercised after someone who was a Gulf War veteran. The same thing with the tanning bed. The same thing with the 27-year-old aerobics instructor that died. She had the Gulf War illness. Nobody could find out why. Mayo Clinic says we can't find anything. So these methods of transferal are very important. What I can tell you as an individual is I would not drink after a Gulf War veteran. I would not eat after a Gulf War veteran. And if you want to be really safe, you don't have unprotected sex with a Gulf War veteran. Now, I believe, though, we're at a point in this country, not knowing what we have around, that I don't believe people should be eating and drinking after each other, obviously, unless you're married and you're in that kind of intimate environment. I have seen families that have stopped eating and drinking after each other. I think we need to keep our hands out of our mouth. We need to quit biting our fingernails. Don't use a pay phone and then put your hands in your mouth. I mean, we're asking for trouble. Years ago, you could do this, but the ramifications are just too great to do that now.
Right. Is there a possibility that this is so serious and the federal government does know how serious it is and they're trying to keep it quiet to protect us from any kind of hysteria or anything like that, like they're notoriously known for doing?
Well, I think it is, that would be more noble to protect you from the hysteria than I believe it really is. I think that there is an intent now to allow people to become ill. I'm sorry. And I know that flies in the face of anything that we have believed as Americans. But why would we bring our troops back here knowing they had been exposed to biological and chemical agents and then deny they have an illness? Why would we continue to allow blood transfusions? We have to look at the facts. So whether or not I say it's intentional or not, that may be my conjecture or opinion, but that doesn't count. The issue is, let's look at the facts. Are they continuing to take their blood? Are they warning people about having unprotected sex among Gulf War veterans? No. Are they treating the disease? Most importantly, no. So we have to look at why.
What's the alternative, though, to that? I mean, what other steps could they have taken without creating some kind of hysteria?
Well, we have to look back at the war. I think we should have not gone to the war in the first place. Was it needed? Was it necessary? No.
Right.
Was it a staged war? Probably. Was it a manipulated war? I believe so. So we have to look at why we went into this in the first place. Why did they not provide a biological monitoring system so these guys could know when they were being affected by biological agents? Did they want them to get affected? I can't answer that question, but I can say, as a commander, as a colonel in the Special Forces told me, there was not one real-time monitoring detection system in the theater of operations. They were all in warehouses someplace. They were not shipped into the theater of operations.
You know what it makes me think of? That this Gulf War syndrome is so bad that I'd just rather have a third-party international force deal with stuff than have to send Americans over to places like Iraq and get sick.
Right, and I guess what disturbs me now is a week after the election, President Clinton seems to be more aggressive in deploying our troops to every little hot spot or even warm spot in the world right now. It's very disturbing.
And it's a little different that this outbreak in Rwanda, where Zaire is, and in Bosnia, they're calling for an international force, which will eventually be an international permanent force for a world authority that is not under any nation's flag, including the United States. And they have to set this up so they can resolve these international issues that they have. And this leans into them getting sympathy toward that, I think.
Well, let's talk about this issue of Zaire. I got a phone call tonight from one young man who's in the 3rd Armored Division. We're talking about tanks. We're talking about the armaments in the military. Why is it that he called me and told me, I got orders to go, or I'm on notice right now, I've gone 24-hour notice to go to Zaire. We had a cholera outbreak there, right?
Right.
What do we need an armored division to go into a cholera outbreak?
See, William Christopher was over in Africa 5 weeks ago, and what he did is they went to all the different African countries and they rallied up individual civilians and recruited them for an international army. And then this thing happens 4 weeks later in Zaire with this cholera outbreak, which is obviously not a military operation. But then the news media, which is the mouth of this beast, speaks forth and says, hey, we need an international force here to help contain the situation. That this is about the establishment of an international force, at least in Africa. And that's kind of what so special about the Gulf War. It's the first time Russia didn't veto a decision that the United States wanted to do. It was the first time that they were all allied together, and Russia did it on the promise of millions of dollars of money that the United States said, and the world bankers said they'd give Russia if they let go of their communist scheme, which they did, and now they're starving to death over in Russia too with no money. So there's some sort of big picture plan that these bozos have in their scheme of things for their domination of the world and its resources, whatever that may be.
Right. Well, taking this this kind of conspiracy theory into effect, where's the benefit to making all these people sick like this? What's the benefit to that? I just don't see that. I don't see where they're coming from. I can see a situation where, okay, we went over to Iraq perhaps to open up the oil industry for American companies, whatever the theory is behind that. But I can see that some biological or chemical weapons were released. Some troops got sick.
Yep. You know what
by that time it was too late. What do you do then?
Okay, Joyce, you want to take a shot at that one first?
Well, let me just say, I do not deal in conspiracy theories. I am dealing with facts. I am saying they sent us in there, they sent us unprepared, they exposed us to certain agents, brought us back, didn't treat us, and are denying the disease. That's not conspiracy, that's fact. Now, why? I cannot answer that. Of course, it has been postulated that it is due to population control or population elimination or whatever, wanting to bring in UN troops. I can't speak for those things. Those are the things that other people are saying. I want to deal on fact here because the issue is it is happening. Why? I don't know. Now, I've been on several radio shows recently, one of them in Missoula, in which the most significant defensive argument that the talk show host could support was this could never happen in America, or I can't understand why it would happen. That is not my responsibility to answer that. I am telling you the facts as they stand. Why can only be answered by a deviant government that would do this in the first place.
See, now, I also don't support a conspiracy theory either. Like the Jim Crow segregation laws in this United States that went on for so long, and I don't believe it was a conspiracy to keep the black citizenry down. And I just think it's prejudice. That you're just talking about institutionalized corruption, which is beyond conspiracy. It's not like people sitting in a smoke-filled room with cigars plotting these things. It's just an institutionalized corruption. It is true that the front page of our Missoulian about a year ago said that the scientists had come forth that if the world's population was not shaved down by 2/3 by the year 2000, we were going to be in a population problem. And this is one of the concepts.
I have an article in front of me, or a letter from an organization called Negative Population Growth, Inc. They're out of Teaneck, New Jersey. This is a real organization, and I have checked with them. And let me just tell you what their goal is. It says the long-range goal of NPG, Inc. is to stabilize U.S. population at a smaller, more sustainable level. We believe that our goal for the United States should be no more than 150 million. For our world, we believe our goal should be a population of no more than 2 billion, its size shortly after the turn of the century.
Right.
Is that the reason for this? I don't know. And I really don't like to get into the quote-unquote conspiracy because we're dealing with facts here. It is happening, and we need to address the issue of how to stop it.
Now, I think one thing we can say as a fact that's not a conspiracy about why it's happening is because the proper methods to prevent it were never implemented. And this goes back to even before the Gulf War, in my vantage point at least, and World War II, and even the mustard gas in World War I. After World War I, we had the Geneva Convention drafted. And after World War II, we have the Nuremberg Principles. But in the 1800s, when Baha'u'llah was in prison, he wrote to the kings and leaders of the world and told them to assemble together as an international tribunal so nations wouldn't have to go to war. And they flat out rejected this concept. Yet, since this time, through like the former Attorney General Ramsey Clark and Geneva and Nuremberg and these different wars, we now have an International Bill of Human Rights. We now have Nuremberg Principles. We now have Geneva Conventions. And we have a standard which could have been implemented without these negative examples from happening. That I believe in preventative medicine and preventative solutions. And that these things could have all been prevented if the people would have, I believe, listened more to what Jesus was talking about in the Lord's Prayer. He says, "Thy kingdom come, it will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And this kingdom is described in the book of Isaiah in chapter 2, that there'll be a house of the Lord, that all the nations will flow to and beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. I don't know if you know it or not, but that's carved in stone in front of the United Nations building.
Right.
And that sure isn't a house of God, let alone a spiritual world government, or that is a world government that's not corrupt. But in Isaiah 9 it says there'll be a descendant of David. That's the chairman of the board, and this is who Baha'u'llah is descended from. And to me it's not a coincidence that Hitler kills the Jews, not knowing which descendant of David might arise. But, you know, I believe in Christ and the Bible and God, and I was kind of surprised, and maybe even wondering, in a curious way, that there's some quotes from the book of Revelations that related to a specific type of set of diseases that would accompany the switchover between this age of corruption and the one of our golden age, which I also believe we're headed toward by the year 2000. I noticed you called this the apocalyptic disease, or somebody did, and I also read somewhere where somebody was quoting Revelations about the pale horse spreading disease. And does that fit into this in any way in your thinking at all? And I realize it's a little bit beyond treatment for the ailment, but I did read about it in your literature, and you did mention it earlier, Joyce.
Well, I don't think there's any way we can look at this issue and not realize that we are living prophecy right now. Whether or not you subscribe to the Bible or the New Testament or the book of Revelation, it follows so closely. We're talking about pestilences. Saddam Hussein utilized not only the chemical and biological agents we're talking about, but some fungal agents. Some wheat smut also was in the Scud missiles. We know that now. So we're talking about, essentially, I believe, Revelation 6:8. I believe that 25% of the world's population will be destroyed by the beasts of the world, which may very well be the viruses, depending on how you translate it. So I think we have to look at that. That's only smart to look at that. And I think we're looking at so much of what is prophecy that we can't turn our eyes away from it. We have to look at this within the realm of what has been prophesied in the past.
We talk about the four horses of the apocalypse, and he says, I saw a pale horse, and it had a power over 1/4 of the world, and its rider was Hades, and death and disease followed this. Well, this pale horse is the United States of America in that it's got a race problem. It's black and white, making it pale or gray, and that the fourth of the planet that the U.S. has power over is the NATO countries. And I don't think I need to talk about the disease and pestilence that follows it when we've spent all tonight talking about the United States' role in the manufacture of these biological and chemical weapons. So anyway, that's available at the Bahai webpage, www.ism.net, squiggly thing, BUPC. And Joyce, you're welcome to download the entire book off our website also, as it's free.
Thank you very much.
Joyce, while we wait for our next call, now that line 2 is open again, you're welcome to call in. I was wondering if you'd talk about how this is happening for modern events, as we're on a 30-day alert militarily in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Could you briefly indicate some of that in the next minute or two before we take our call?
Okay, let me just say, first of all, the war with Saddam Hussein never ended. We are officially at war with Saddam Hussein.
That's right.
I talked to a lieutenant colonel tonight who's active duty, and he did not even know this. Let me briefly say, Public Law 102-25, those of you that are into research, go look at it. President Bush signed Public Law 102-25, which, among other things, established August 2nd, 1990 as a starting date of the Persian Gulf War. The law indicated that the war would end on the date thereafter prescribed by presidential proclamation or by law. But to date, no presidential proclamation has been issued.
Absolutely.
Nor has any law been enacted to establish an ending date for the war. So whenever I get my figures as to how many people have died or how many people have participated in the war, it's cumulative. And we're already up to 3,700,000 as of 1994 that have participated in the war, and now 6,700 according to the government that have died in service in the war. This is information you're not being told, but you can request the information and we provide it to you. Let me just give the number one more time, 713-587-5437, 713-587-5437.
So, have you heard about this military warning for 30 days until the end of this month?
Oh, absolutely.
What's that about?
Not only that, but the troops that are right now targeted to go to Zaire and Bosnia, we are depleting our troops in the United States right now. This is what concerns me. Is not so much are we going to send an armored division to go over and help out with a cholera outbreak, which I think is the stupidest thing in the world, to send our troops into more disease. But, think of the fallacy of this. We've got more disease than we can handle right now in our own military. The 82nd Airborne is sick. The 101st Airborne is sick. The 3rd AD, the 1st Infantry Division, they're so sick. So we're sending our sick troops into the area of a cholera outbreak. Yes, we are on alert. Yes, many, many troops tonight sit on alert, ready to go. Why are we doing this? It seems to me we are depleting the U.S. troops for a reason. Why are we getting them out of the country And what are they planning to do? I don't know.
This is just so terrible that America claims to have a strong defense or a strong military. It's got the worst defense that I've ever seen in my life, where we leave our own soldiers open to be hit by the enemy that we armed, that was our friend, that we then tricked into being our enemy for political reasons by telling him he could have Kuwait through April Glaspie, that Bush told Saddam he could have that was his 19th province, and just the lies and the lies. That with McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, in '69, he took away all the anti-missile missiles in the Montana High Line. So we can't shoot down incoming Russian ballistic missiles anymore. Whereas in Moscow, in Switzerland, in Beijing, in other places, they have total underground facilities for their citizenry to survive. The American people have nothing. That we're just so unprotected as an American civilian population. It's just sheerly frightening that all this money that's taxed to go to defense, in fact, doesn't defend a single one of us here at home, whether we're in the military or we're civilians at all. It's just a sheer waste.
I'd like to say something about that. One of the things that I thought of when I first heard this, when you were on the Art Bell program, is that I saw how everything seemed so perfectly orchestrated, and we've done a lot of research, about this whole situation because, knowledge is power, and that's why we're into this. And so, one thing that I thought as soon as you got into this, I said, the whole propaganda thing with the Nair was our first rallying cry to go to war. And so I thought, well, could this be a repeat of it? We're doing all this stuff, and it's so perfectly orchestrated. So, now they did the thing in the South, and they increased the no-fly zone, and so my opinion is that they're going to use this and they're going to say, oh, yeah, look what Iraq did to us and blah, blah, blah. And they're not going to tell the public that, of course, we sold it to them. And they're going to say, well, why we should go and we should kill this man and we should go back over there. And they're going to get people all stirred up. And so to me, I saw this as a rallying cry to go back to war. And I'd like to see what you think about that.
Well, I have to agree. I mean, this is beyond anything that we can even imagine. We're sending troops over there for non-militaristic reasons. While we're having urban assault exercises happening here in the United States, we just had one here in Houston, in Sugar Land, Texas, where the urban assault team from the 160th Special Forces came in and did an urban assault with live ammo and equipment that, is not utilized in an urban situation. There's something going on, and a lot of us probably have an understanding of what it is. Nobody really wants to talk about it openly. Of course, we'll be labeled as right-wing conspiracy theorists, but there is so much going on. Yes, I am afraid of what's going on overseas and why we're depleting our troops here. We have no real active-duty military. Let me give you one figure. Out of the 700,000 troops that served during the Persian Gulf War, and we're talking about the eminent troops during the time, or the troops that occupied Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, etc., during the time of the war, out of those 700,000 troops, already 550,000 of them have been separated from the military. Now think about that figure in an all-volunteer military, where these people wanted to be career individuals. We have already separated 550,000 of them. Well, it is my belief that they have been medically separated, but still 4/5 of our military is left. I mean, America, we have a real problem.
Well, let's take more calls. Thanks for being patient and waiting on the line. You're on the air.
Hi, Joyce. I'm a veteran here. I live in Montana. I was over in the Persian Gulf. And I recently have been, for the last few years, really sick. I've been in and out of a wheelchair, walk around with a cane when I'm not.
Put their number up there.
And I guess I have two questions. One, I'd be really interested to know where you're going to be at in Idaho. I'd like to come see that. And secondly, I'd like to know if you had any information. I was in a EPW processing unit over there. We worked on a regular basis, in fact every day, with enemy prisoners of war, and I've not heard or seen anything about picking up, whether it be biological agents or other types of things, from those people.
Excellent questions. What unit were you attached to over there?
The 420th. We were under the 403rd EPW camp.
Okay. Have you ever heard me talk before?
No.
I usually always talk about the EPW situation. And the reason is that we have so many law enforcement individuals that were working with the EPWs. Now, for those of you that don't know, That is enemy prisoners of war. So we had a lot of our MP units, military police units, military police individuals that served and took care of and guarded the enemy prisoners of war. The problem is that a lot of those EPWs were sick. A lot of them had been exposed to biologicals. The obvious question is going to be, who exposed them to the biologicals? How did they get them? There's two answers for that. The blow-up and the destruction of Camisea and the other biological and chemical plants, or that the United States used them on Iraq. And I will allow you to make that decision, come to that conclusion yourself. But here's the problem, is our MPs are now coming back to the United States sick. Many guys like yourself are unable to function, are in a wheelchair, and many of them that were police officers face even greater problems because they don't want to go to the VA. If they go to the VA, they're going to get a psych diagnosis. They'll give them a psych eval, and because 90% of all the troops have been given a psychiatric disorder, they can't carry a gun any longer. I've been talking to several civilian police officers as well as a police captain that faces this situation. So your situation is not unique, unfortunately. And I have been talking about those that came in contact with the EPWs because I'm getting a number of phone calls from those guys that served in those units. It is a real problem. Did they get exposure from those guys? Absolutely.
Now, what's the idea between the connection between like Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing, and I guess even what they were saying happened down in Texas, where they got angry at some of the things that happened down in Waco, where military personnel were used. You think it's some sort of combination between maybe they were exposed to some of these chemicals, as well as being angry about citizens in Texas being hit by the Army?
Well, we were talking about previously with one of your callers, a very intelligent individual that called in about the environmental illnesses, and he spoke to the fact that there is a disturbance in the brain. Well, there have been several outbursts of violent behavior that is unexplained, and I mean really unexplained. I can't speak for whether or not Timothy McVeigh was involved in violent behavior. I don't know. I don't know anything about the man other than he was a Gulf War veteran. He was a very well-respected Gulf War veteran. Contrary to what you might see in the slant in the news, he had a very, very excellent record. He was being considered for Delta Forces at the time. And if you know what Delta Forces is, I mean, you've got to be almost superhuman to get into Delta Forces. But he was a Gulf War veteran. Now, the Fort Bragg, North Carolina incident in which the sniper, opened up fire on his troops is very unique, very unusual. You don't go into the military, you don't have all the training that you do, and go through all the stress levels that you do, and then all of a sudden open fire on your men. You just don't do that. So we have to look at why. This man was a Gulf War veteran also. Now, in California, in Representative Lantos's office, U.S. Representative Lantos last week, a week and a half ago, a veteran went in there, had not been able to get treatment, and he pulled a gun out and he killed himself. That was just a week and a half ago, and I got a call from an LAPD officer who told me about that. So are they having unexplained violent events? Absolutely. Can we account for them? No. And I'm working on several cases right now in trying to help physicians and psychologists and psychiatrists understand this is something that is not unique among Gulf War veterans. Many people are experiencing it. And we need to be aware of this and need to be supportive and provide real treatment for these men and women.
Yes, hi. I just have a question about the treatment that's available now for Gulf War symptoms. How effective is that treatment?
Well, let me put it this way. It was much more effective given at the time of the exposure than it is today, because there has been destruction of the immune system that has been superimposed upon the infections. I would say that, yes, had people been given the doxycycline initially, they would be much better off. And here's a good time to point out that out of the 28 coalition countries that served alongside the United States government, 27 of those countries now report sick and dying Gulf War veterans, including the most recent one that has come forward. The Czech government says that their troops are dying. Of course, there is no Gulf War illness and there were no exposures, you understand that, but we have all these people dying all over the world. Now, here is a very significant point. The French government is the only one that does not report sick and dying Gulf War veterans. They did two things differently. They did not immunize their troops, and secondarily, they gave prophylactic, preventative doxycycline on a daily basis. I have talked to some troops that served under the French flag. France gave their troops 400 in the morning and 500 milligrams at night. Now, that is a whopping dose. And it made them so sick that they had to eat, they told me, 3 MREs to keep down the doxycycline. But you see, there were people that knew that this exposure was going to happen, and the French, all along the war, all during the war, gave their troops doxycycline. And I believe they are much safer, or it was much safer to do that, and I believe they're much healthier today because of it. Now, you asked the question about the doxycycline.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are allergic to doxycycline, which is tetracycline, which you remember was the drug that was given for acne.
Yes.
It is very cheap. It is inexpensive. Nobody's going to make any money off of it because it is unpatented or non-patented and generic. It costs about $5 a week. And by the way, we provide it free to Gulf War veterans if you can't afford it. And if you have a prescription, send us the copy of the prescription. We provide it free to you. And the reason we're doing this is because Gulf War veterans have become so destitute that they have resorted to getting bovine, that's for cows, or swine, for pigs, antibiotics. They have gone to feed stores, and I know it's going on in Idaho right now, and we want it to stop. We don't want our military to be debased any further to where they have to go to an animal feed store and buy their antibiotics. It's bad enough they're told they have a mental problem and they're not sick and there is no disease, but we want them treated. If you're a physician, will prescribe to you, and I know that there is a physician in Montpelier, Idaho, that is very understanding about this disease, and if you're sick and you're in Montpelier or near that area, please call me and I can let you know his name. But we do need to get them treated. If you can't use tetracycline, there is Cipro or Zithromax. Cipro is more expensive, and Zithromax is even more expensive than that. And now some recent research by one of the doctors has now found out that a drug called Famvir, Famvir, is helpful. But it costs about $150 to $300 a month. It's very expensive. Another drug that is effective is acyclovir or Zovirax, which is an antiviral drug, and it seems to help. I've seen people actually get out of wheelchairs that have been placed on acyclovir and Famvir. So there are some other things, but you really do need to talk to your physician. But first, your physician's got to find out that there really is an illness, and the government's been lying, and the Pentagon's been lying, and that's quite a job to educate your doctor.